Hi, and welcome to this presentation on fixing fragments and run-ons. First, we'll start with a couple of definitions. The first one being a fragment. A fragment is a group of words that's not a sentence, but that's used as a sentence. And so usually, because a sentence includes three parts, it includes a subject, a verb, and it expresses a complete thought, a fragment is missing something. It's missing a subject, perhaps, it's missing a verb, or it's missing that complete thought. So that's what a fragment is defined as. You might sometimes hear fragments described as dependent clauses because they cannot stand on their own. Here are a bunch of sentences, and you can see some of these are sentences and some of these are fragments or dependent clauses, and we'll kind of go through a couple of these. Looking at the first one, when the water mattress broke, that's defined as a fragment and as a dependent clause. The reason for that being, if we look at that, it's not a sentence, it doesn't make sense. We want to know what happens when the water mattress breaks. And so we need to add something to the end. It's a dependent clause because it's depending on something else in order for that to make sense. The second sentence is the completion of that sentence. When the water mattress broke, Sam swam out of bed. And so we see how it's been fixed. They added a sentence to the end of that. To have flat feet and a head to match, that's missing a subject. And so in the next sentence, it's fixed to include that our instructor has flat feet and a head to match. The next sentence is fine. Tom sells toothless combs to bald men. That one has a subject, has a verb or a predicate, and it does express a complete thought. To sell combs to bald men is not a complete thought. It's missing a subject. It has sort of a verb, to sell, but again, it's not really a verb, and so we needed to add a subject and a verb to that, so that the change was that Tom sells toothless combs to bald men. And then the last two sentences, again, we have a subject and a verb, an ing verb, so we need to add something to that. The bug's hitting my windshield, ... We want to know what happens because of that. We could change this one by just taking out the ing, so the bugs hit my windshield, if that's a statement, that would work. The way that it's been fixed, though, they add to the end, the bugs hitting my windshield spilled their guts, this time spilled being the verb. Now there's the three ways really that we can correct fragments, and we looked at some of those in those exercises or those examples just before. Number one, we can add words, so we could add a subject, we could add a verb, or we could add a number of words to make those a complete thought. So the example, when I got my new car, it's a fragment because we want to know, well, what happens when you received your new car? When we fixed that, when I got my new car, I was able to drive all over the state without worry. So that is the revision. We added a bunch of things to that sentence. We added the complete thought, so we added a whole new sentence to that. We can also delete words. We'll talk more about this when we get into the next part. But words like if and when, if we simply take those off, it would make the sentence correct. So if the boys are saved, deleting the if, the boys are saved, then now we have a complete thought. We have a subject, we have a predicate, and we have a complete thought. We could also fix them by including a subordinating conjunction, and this is where you have a list of these that's listed as a document. I encourage you to print that off or to reference it, to bookmark it, so that you have it as a handy reference. And by doing this, what we can do is hook the fragment to a neighboring sentence. And so here's an example. So after the horse kicked my head, there's your fragment, he limped away. And what we can do is, if we have knowledge of a subordinating conjunction and how those rules work, we can connect the two sentences. So after the horse kicked my head, comma, he limped away. So that makes it now a sentence. So we went from a fragment to combining two sentences, which makes it a sentence. Also, it will provide you with some sentence variety, so you won't have all of your sentences being short and choppy. So using something like this can increase your sentence variety as well as give you correct sentence structure. Now that was a little bit on run-ons, or I'm sorry, on fragments. Fragments, again, just as a quick review, are those groups of words that are missing something, either a subject, a verb, or a complete thought. They cannot stand on their own because they don't make sense, or they're missing something. The opposite of a fragment is a run-on. And a run-on is when you have two or more sentences punctuated as one. There's two different kinds. There's a fuse, which means there's no punctuation, no stop sign. You just go right on through. I took my dog for a walk on a hot summer day. He needs a drink of water. There's no pause. We just run both of those two sentences right into each other. A comma place, on the other hand, is kind of like a yield sign. So we know that there should be a pause. We put a comma there instead. There should be some other kind of punctuation, maybe a period, maybe a semicolon. But we put a comma there. Signals a pause, but not the right kind of pause. And so I took my dog for a walk on a hot summer day. He needs a drink of water. The idea behind both of these and why they're incorrect is that complete thoughts need to have the correct punctuation. And again, there's lots of ways that we can fix these run-ons. The first way is to add a coordinating conjunction. And maybe at some point in your education you heard about the fanboys. These I would commit to memory. So the fanboys are for and nor, but, or, yet, and so. And what these coordinating conjunctions do is they will combine two complete thoughts with one of these words and a comma in the middle. So if you look at your first example, I took my dog for a walk on a hot summer day, comma, and a so that's one of our fanboys. He needs a drink of water. So it signals a relationship between those two sentences. So using a coordinating conjunction, all of those words, for means because, and signals an addition, nor signals kind of a contrast, as does but, or we kind of have that choice. Yet is a cause and effect, as is so. And so each of those words function differently, but they show a connection between those sentences. They show a transition. The next sentence, I took my dog for a walk on a hot summer day, comma, and he needs a drink of water. The rule with the fanboy is that if we have a sentence, and we have two sentences, we have a sentence on both sides of the comma and the fanboy, then that's correct. So it's sentence, comma, fanboy, sentence. Yet another example, Martha lost her temper, comma, and she yelled at her boss. Again, we have two complete thoughts. Martha lost her temper. She yelled at her boss. The comma and the and just signals that there's two sentences, putting a comma and an and to connect them, and it shows some connection. The rule with using a fanboy, so the for and nor, but, or, yet, and so, if you are combining two complete sentences, you absolutely must have a comma before the conjunction. Another way to fix a run-on is to simply use a semicolon. And using a semicolon is just like using a period. The only difference is you don't capitalize the second sentence's first word. And so you notice, I took my dog for a walk on a hot summer day, semicolon, he, notice the non-capital he, needs a drink of water. There's another way to use a semicolon, and that's with a conjunctive adverb. And again, you'll see a list of these, and so I again encourage you to check out on that list of keywords, the subordinating conjunctions, you'll see those, you'll see the coordinating conjunctions, and then you'll see the conjunctive adverbs. But when you use a conjunctive adverb, you're using a semicolon, but you're also using a comma after. And so it again, these words will signal some kind of a transition. I took my dog for a walk on a hot summer day, semicolon, therefore, comma, he needs a drink of water. And so again, I encourage you to check out that list of conjunctive adverbs. They're kind of long words. They're therefore, consequently, additionally, those type of words that will kind of signal that there's a relationship between these two sentences. The next one is that you can write one part of the sentence as a subordinate to the other. And this is where we use that subordinating conjunction list again. There's a couple of different ways that you can use a subordinating conjunction. You can use the subordinating conjunction at the beginning of a sentence, or you can use a subordinating conjunction in the middle of a sentence. And so we have an example: when Martha lost her temper, comma, she yelled at her boss. The first part of that includes the word when, which is a subordinating conjunction. Because we use the subordinating conjunction at the beginning of a sentence, we need to include a comma. And what happens in a subordinating conjunction, or with a subordinating conjunction, is that the first part of the sentence becomes a fragment or dependent. So when Martha lost her temper can no longer stand on its own. And so we need to add something to that. And so that's why the comma exists there. So the rule for using subordinating conjunctions: if you have a subordinating conjunction at the beginning of a sentence, you must include a comma after that first sentence. Because the teacher is having surgery, comma, the class will start later. Because is your subordinating conjunction. The teacher is having surgery is a complete thought. The class will start later is a complete thought. But when we add the because to the first part, it now all of a sudden it's dependent. It needs some help. Because the teacher is having surgery, comma, the class will start later. The other way to use a subordinating conjunction is to use that conjunction in the middle of a sentence. And if you use it in the middle of a sentence, you don't need a comma. The class starts late because the teacher is having surgery. And this is a type of sentence that you're used to writing. You don't normally put a comma in the middle of a sentence with the word because. That's not something, so don't start doing that. What most of the time happens is the error comes when you're using it at the beginning of a sentence. And so just know that when you use a subordinating conjunction at the beginning of a sentence, you must include a comma. So as a quick review, there's a couple of ways, again, to fix fragments and run-ons. Number one, I can use a sentence. So this is a formula for those of you who may be more math-minded. You start with a sentence. You include a fanboy, for and nor, but, or, yet, and so, and you follow that up with a sentence. You might have a sentence followed by a semicolon and another sentence. You might, if you're using a subordinating conjunction at the beginning, have a fragment at the beginning followed by a comma and then a sentence. Or you also might have a sentence followed by a fragment, which means no comma, because a subordinating conjunction is being used in the middle of the sentence. If you have any questions on this presentation, don't hesitate to reach out. Again, there will be a quiz on this information, so make sure that you understand what a fragment is, that you can recognize them, and that you can fix run-ons and fragments correctly.